How am I learning to integrate all of these pieces and parts of myself after breast cancer? How am I integrating my finances and the damage, the absolute freaking destruction? Like they freaking took a bomb and threw a bomb in the middle of my life and blew my life up, blew my chest up, blew my relationships up, blew my body, my nervous system, blew everything up. How do you bring that all back together? For me, it has been the Condor Approach. Simple, pure, easy. Click the link, go. Tell Kole I sent you.
Whether you're a life coach, therapist, biohacker, invested in wellness, or in the healthcare profession, if you have an intention to work in psychedelic spaces, you're in the right place then. If you're called, get involved. But first, get informed. Let's talk the 4 N's: intake, intention, in-space integration, leading to deeper transformations. Psychedelic Coach Podcast, Tah and Kole. Walk you through the process, it's all possible. Leave space for the follow through. Most importantly, integration is not optional.
All right, welcome to the Psychedelic Coach Podcast.
Welcome aboard.
So, I have a little bit of a confession to make.
Oh my gosh.
It's a big confession.
Did you do it again?
I didn't want anyone to
Know what?
exactly that we were going to phase out talking about psychedelics in 2025.
What?
I know, you knew that because we talked about that at all of our meetings. But something brought us back, bro.
What brought us back?
It was the Ibogaine initiative happening in Texas.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
So for those that don't know, and I'm no expert of Iboga, so let me be very clear there. But Iboga is from West Africa, an area called Gabon. And in Gabon, it has been traditionally used once someone is over a certain elder age as a part of an initiation. And basically, if you survive it, you passed. But if you don't, you didn't.
Ibogaine is a drug, a medicine that is derived from a plant, a bush called Iboga or Iboga, depending on who you are and how you're pronouncing it. It is a psychedelic class substance that causes a lot of alteration in state and a lot of possibility for alteration in the nervous system, in the brain in particular. And there have been tons of studies around it being used in people with PTSD, complex PTSD in rewiring the brain, addictive dynamics in removing the dynamics around addiction, depression. There's so many different implications for Iboga. And one of my good friends, maybe y'all knew about this if you've listened to our podcast. One of my great friends died about in August of last year. And when I met him, he was post Iboga, and he was in a major head-on collision with an 18-wheeler, and he had 60 surgeries on his body, and his body was ravaged. He was in a wheelchair, he couldn't get up, and he became addicted to opiates. And his life was already wrecked, and after getting out and being addicted to these pain medications, it became wrecked in a different way. And he couldn't find any way out of it. He went to therapy, he went to rehab, he went to a whole lot of different things. And the one thing that helped him move away from the chemical dependence on opiates was Ibogaine. And he went and he sat and they hooked him up to cardiac monitors, and he had a doctor in the place, and they really worked with him in this space. And after he did this one treatment with Iboga, he was completely beyond addiction to these medications. After he was on I don't even know how many years he was on these medications, but it was a long time. And it changed his life. And he made it a big part of his life to support other people in being able to get to these experiences. And it was a really wonderful place. So that was my entry to being able to really learn about Iboga and to start exploring the potentials of it. And it's not like a a medication or substance, a psychedelic substance that you can just take and in your bedroom. Some people do it, but I wouldn't. There can be some really serious health dynamics involved with it. Like you were saying, Cole, it's a rite of initiation, and if you survive it,
You initiated.
then you've initiated into the next part of your life. And so this is not a substance that that people just go out and use frivolously in the street. And it's not something that people will get addicted to. This is a big experience that people go through. And it's now being explored for PTSD in post-war soldiers and military people. It's being used for PTSD and a lot of things, a lot of dynamics, and a lot of people. So I'm actually very excited about the fact that there's an Ibogaine initiative happening. And so we've been using a lot of the Condor Approach tools and all of the things that we teach here on the Psychedelic Coach podcast to support people in all sorts of transformational experiences. And we've been getting some blowback around the whole situation with psychedelics. And there was a consideration of us moving into a space of just supporting people with integrating transformational experiences. And now that this has come around, we've found another reason to stay in the psychedelic space. And I love psychedelics. Psychedelics have changed my life. I know they've changed yours. They've been a huge change for me and so many people. And walking away from psychedelics was something that really gave me a lot of angst. To actually be pulled back into it has given me a refreshed energy. And I'm very excited about it. And we met some really awesome people at that Ibogaine initiative. And the one thing that I found wasn't really discussed was the people who have been marginalized in the United States of America. And this would be Black and brown folks, people that don't speak English, Asian folks, and so on, female bodies, like things like people that have been marginalized. And so I stepped up to the microphone. I was actually the last person to ask a question. And I was like, this is a great initiative, and I appreciate all that y'all have been through and the things that you're doing. But what are you going to do to make sure that the marginalized people don't fall through the cracks with this initiative? And I got some really solid answers that really gave me some hope.
I think that's part of what gave me hope was the panelists' ability to directly answer the questions. I have historically seen, especially with people that look like me in white bodies, that when you ask them questions about BIPOC community, marginalized communities, what are the efforts, where the plant is coming from, sustainability, accessibility, there's certain questions that I feel like trigger a nervous system response that someone can't even sit in the discomfort of the question, and they talk around it. They're not direct. They don't actually answer the question. And the directness for me is what gave me the hope. And so Brian Hubbard is who you asked the question to. He's really one of the main voices at the forefront of this Texas initiative. It started in Kentucky and then fell apart there when the government changed hands. And then he was on Joe Rogan, which brought a lot of, for this particular group called Vets, that's taking people down to work in Mexico with Iboga, with Ibogaine. And the thing that gave me hope, one, was how many people came up to you and was dialoguing with you after the question. We had a few other friends that also stood up and asked questions around sustainability, because it is a tiny region that Iboga grows in. And so with all of this publication and all of this publicity, it's quite dangerous on the environment in Gabon where Iboga grows, because it takes 7 years. It can be cultivated, but it's a long process. And so though there's things that are very exciting in this, there's still a lot of questions. And we don't pretend to know everything at the Condor Approach. Our sole intention, and I'll speak for me specifically, is around learning how to ask questions through curiosity, how to confront without conflicting, like how to actually approach things, because the way that you ask a question is maybe even more important than the questions you ask, so that it can be received, so the person can actually consider the question, because it certainly doesn't happen if you yell at someone. It certainly doesn't happen if you shame someone. So it's like the Condor Approach is really about bridging the ancient and the new age and the new ways and the new technologies, which means that in order for something like the Ibogaine initiative to truly be supplemental to help a lot of people, there's going to have to be a chemical synthetic version. And what are the conversations around the culture in Gabon and how it impacts them? Are any of those elders being included? They've been working with this master teacher plant for who knows how long. So even in that excitement, there's a lot of questions.
Tons of questions. I have questions upon questions. Iboga is not my place. It's nothing that I've ever facilitated or supported anyone in being in. I do know a nice chunk of people who've experienced it. And they've all had the very similar things to say, how much it's changed their lives, how much they've moved away from behaviors that were dysfunctional for them and relationships that were dysfunctional for them and substances and foods and alcohol and things that they had challenges getting away from. Like I have several people that told me that they just didn't have a drive to drink alcohol anymore and they couldn't stop drinking alcohol, either casually or from addictive spaces. And to be able to move away from that is a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I've had people work with psilocybin and have really amazing spaces and can move away from things, but nothing quite like Iboga. And the rewiring, the capacity for the brain to be rewired with Iboga is quite profound. It's like erasing all the old stuff and putting in a whole new operating system that you design. Totally. It's beautiful. And I haven't experienced it myself. It's not something that I could sit here and vouch for, other than the effects that I know it's had on other people. And I'm a huge fan of what I've seen so far. I'm an advocate for it. And with all that, it doesn't make a difference if I've experienced it or not. Being able to integrate these experiences, people need to have some sort of structure to support them in integration, which is where the Condor Approach comes into play.
Some of the questions that come along the pipeline for me is, if we know that at the current moment with the Texas Ibogaine initiative, the initial goal is to study it, research it, and then see how it could be synthesized and all of that. And so then many of the listeners right now may be having the questions like, does that mean some level of bastardization where then there's going to be patents on certain formulas with something like Ibogaine and the companies that will own it, and all those questions exist, which is why for me this conversation is important, because if you're listening right now, especially if you're in the state of Texas, are you going to show up for the dialogue with the people making the decisions? So many are quick to point the finger, but they don't actually mobilize or go show up for things or vote locally where it matters. If you're here in Austin, we're right at the Capitol. We're where this is kicking off, right? This is where a lot of the relationships are. And it's easy to point a finger and tell people what they're doing wrong, but very few can come with solutions that are effective or understand the needs of the other person of why they think doing it that way is the best option. Because as I sat and listened to some of the panelists and some of the soldiers and some of their experiences, one of the quotes that still stands out as one of the most powerful for me is one of the guys said, "If we abused our children, would we still have war?"
If we didn't abuse our children.
Yeah, if we stopped abusing our children,
right.
would we still have war?
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah,
it was powerful. I can't remember it exactly.
That was a huge line for me, too. There was a big round of applause when that person said that. And it's something that I agree with. If we stopped abusing one another as human beings, would we have the need to war? And war in and of itself is an abusive space,
yeah.
no matter how you slice it.
And what they were specifically talking about is in this film, many of the soldiers, even though they had, many of them, 10 plus, 15 plus years of combat and very traumatic circumstances in combat. And this isn't to argue whether or not we should even be in other countries in combat. This is strictly about this documentary itself. But this guy in particular, like, he had his arm almost completely blown off. So we're talking about significant physical traumas in war, but each of the people talking in the documentary, what they saw in Iboga was childhood experiences that had caused hurt, where they were bullied, where they decided they'd never be a victim anymore, and things that got channeled that the military was the perfect place for those wounds to live, where they felt cast out, they felt alone, they got that camaraderie, they got so many things that they had been missing. And if you weren't missing those things, would you have the same drive for the military training that happens as a result of joining any part of the military, but especially with the Rangers and the Special Ops and the Navy SEALs and all of that?
Yeah, there's a big part of the development of the human brain that moves a person into a space where the executive part of the brain, the frontal lobe, comes online at around 25, 26 years old. And so we put these kids into the armed forces from 18, some of them sneak in at 17, and they don't do anything about the people who sneak in at 17, right? They let them in. So we got people who are 18, 19, 20, all the way up to 25. And this is where a crucial part of the executive function of the brain is developed. And this is where part of the challenge is for people is they develop a lot of habitual dynamics around how they execute things. And then that moves into their adulthood after they leave the service. And that becomes a challenge because that's how their executive brain is programmed. And Iboga has helped these people to actually let go of the traumatic circumstances that led up to basic training and the warring dynamics, and to let go of all of that stuff. All of that stuff is highly traumatic. And it's just wonderful. I'm excited.
It's incredible stuff. And, you know, I'm continually having dialogue with people of varying perspectives on this matter. And so I hear the people that are talking about, yeah, but from a sustainability, and the people of Gabon, it's going to be another form of capitalizing and all of that same consumeristic approach we've had. And we're going into another country to strip away a resource, you know, with, like we have with oil, like we have with diamonds, like we have with all these other resources. And at some point, if we don't have any healing from the top down, the military people, the ones that are making these military decisions, then do the wars even end? And so it's this, we have to have the grassroots efforts, and also we have to have some things changing from the top down, as some of these older, more conservative folks that have been around to give an opportunity for there to even be a softening of edges of some of the control post-Nixon. What happened with everything with the really anti-drug campaign that happened since Nixon?
The whole Nixon thing that's a can of worms that we could open, but I don't want to open that right now.
That's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other 5 episodes.
Yeah, true.
The dynamic around people colonizing and going in and taking and all of this stuff, this is where we start to create a dialogue with people and places and things, and start to support people in getting support outside of the Iboga space and the Ibogaine space, outside of mushrooms, outside of MDMA, all of this stuff, as we start opening people up to really starting to have relationships with the self primarily. When you can have a relationship with yourself and you can actually see what's messing with you, there are things that you can navigate without Iboga, without mushrooms, without all of these things. And when we have these tools in place, moving into this, we won't need as much Ibogaine. We won't need as much mushrooms or as much MDMA or any pharmaceuticals for that matter, because people have the skill sets to change their minds and their brains outside of that dynamic. And that's the powerful thing about systems like the Condor Approach, is we have these tools. So how many people have come to the Condor Approach and they're like, I don't need psychedelics anymore at all. I have these tools now, and I know how to actually reprogram myself and actually follow what's going on. And when we have this on the front end with something where we can support people in this, we won't need as much Iboga.
And truthfully, we have people that have worked with all the psychedelics, including Iboga, and it's not like they're totally healed and don't need any support. Iboga is a transformational experience that then, going back totally different to an environment, still takes being able to learn how to communicate your emotions. Just because you're finally able to feel them doesn't wave a magic wand to give you the skill set of communication. And that part of integration is such an important piece, because even if someone goes and has a session and comes back totally different, that is traumatizing to the constructs they left behind. Even if they seem like a positive person or things are quote unquote pleasant now, that can actually create a dysregulation in like the children in the environment, because they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, because now there is a lack of safety because they don't know this new person. They don't really, how could they suddenly trust after seeing a lifetime of a parent being a certain way, suddenly just flip-flop and change? So it's not so easy either of just, oh, one treatment's 85% effective and after 2 treatments it's 97. But it's effective for what? Certain traumatic events, certain ways of being have shifted, but a person's ability to be in community, a person's ability to communicate, a person's ability to feel their feelings and not stuff it down, that those things don't suddenly appear within all of that. And we've had people go for experiences and just not know what to do with the result of coming out of it. And so I'm thrilled to still be in Texas at this point. I'm thrilled to find more ways to be involved in the conversation because I want to know who profits. Who is going to be paying the hidden costs culturally, ecologically? What is that going to mean? What are some of the plans that if we are going to study it, how do we include, or how are they planning? I say we, it's not we. It's them, the people that are doing the research. How can we support you in that dialogue? We're happy to do that. And this is where it's having the opportunity to have more people seated at a table that have done enough internal work that are willing to listen and willing to understand what are the needs that you have that are driving you to make the decisions that you're making so that we can find some common ground to move from. Because what I do know is that there is still a big divide in perspectives, a big divide in what, quote unquote, should be done. And for everyone listening, just going to an event and staking all of your questions to try to shame someone or put them on the spot is ineffective in changing anything.
It's way ineffective. And this is part of the dynamic, though, is to be able to have these conversations from a space that is outside of the idea of scarcity. And when we talk about a lot of the activism that's going on, that's scared that we're going to drain out all of Iboga from Gabon or whatever, ayahuasca from the rainforest, from the Amazon, like all of these are scarcity-based ideas that are rooted in fear. And these are the same things that keep people in the space of greed. Greed comes from fear. I'm afraid that I won't have enough. I need to get more. I need to keep making more and keep making more money. And all this is all deficit-based ideas. When we can sit down and be nourished with each other and have conversations where we are all nourished and everybody wins, then there is a different dynamic here. There's enough to go around for everyone, for everything. We have to create plans and strategies to make sure that everything is fortifiable and that we are fortifiable as human beings. That's part of the issue here. And that's part of what we talk about at Condor is what is the strategy? There are no limited human beings. There are only limited states of being and limiting strategies to keep us in those states. And if we go about this Ibogaine initiative, moving from a scarcity dynamic, we are creating a limited state of being from a limiting strategy. And this is where we have these conversations like, okay, what do we need to do? Nope, that's not going to work. What else? Who else has a suggestion? Bring in that person over there. Bring in that person from the hood who may have a completely different idea. Bring in the person from Gabon. Bring in the person from the rainforest. Let's sit down and let's have a conversation. Let's have all the conversations and let's slow down and have the conversations. Let's take our time with the conversations because if we rush through it, we're going to get the same rush job stuff that we've been doing with modern medicine. It's let's rush to get the next technology out as soon as possible and make as much money as possible. But then, you know what? Let's hold on. Let's not drop it because we still have to make money from the stuff that we put out 5 years ago. So let's hold on to this technology. This is the volley that I've seen inside of the medical industry. And it's everything is a rush job. And then we stop and then we don't deliver because we got money involved and there's greed involved and that greed is scarcity based. And when we look at these dynamics, all of our capitalistic society is deficit based. We provide people with ideas of scarcity. Any type of TV commercial that you put on is tired of this happening, not enough of this, not enough of this, try these things and buy this. Everything that we buy, not everything, but a lot of the things we buy are scarcity based. A lot of the services, a lot of the coaching, people come to me for coaching and it's, I don't have enough of this. I don't have enough confidence. They're all scarcity based. And what I'm doing with folks and what we're doing with folks at the Condor Approach is we're getting people to slow down and see that we have all the resources here together. But we need to have these discussions.
I think part of it is recognizing that the resource is beyond the plant, the animal, the substance, the whatever, right? That the resources is within all of the intelligence, not only of the master plant that may be involved, but the people in it too. Because at some point, you and I have talked about this before, and it's something that there is a level for me of arrogance that we could possibly believe that as humans, we could destroy this planet. Because we see that, look, our choices do cause effects, and those effects ultimately will impact us. And so there's another layer for me that if I go macro and say that it's all a part of a oneness, and I recognize that there are times within myself in evolution, parts that will die and will not be, they will become a part of the whole in a different way. And that nothing has ever gone forever. It's re-articulated, re-innovated, it's evolved, right? The cells in our body, there is nothing original in our current body matter. It is a rearticulation or an uptake or a recycle of what we've consumed, eaten, drank, come in contact with. And for me, even with plants, because I do view them as master teachers, how do we know that they don't have the greater intelligence that this is the next move that would come at a cost? Because everything comes at a cost. When I eat any type of food, then there is a cost and there is a price being paid for that integration. How do we show up with the gratitude, the consent, the consciousness, the consideration? Like, that's where we are right now, because as much as we don't want to rush things, sometimes things need to happen immediately in order for the opportunity to take hold. And this Ibogaine initiative is not new, and so it may be perceived new, and it may seem very fast, when actually people have been working on it for a while. So what would you say to the person listening that's, yeah, but Tah, it could, if we, with just the popularity growing and all the people that are going for Iboga or Ibogaine or looking for it on the black web, are we going to start having people going to rob the fields and cut in the night and steal from the tribes where they are in Gabon? Because many of them raise it and they cultivate it there. So what would you say to the person listening that's, no, Tah, we don't have all the resource. It would be stripped away and gone forever if we just said yes to it?
Yeah, that's a possibility, I would say. I would say that is a possibility. What are you going to do about it in your own home? What are you doing right now to have the discussions with the people around you? How are you slowing down to have the conversations and inform and educate people about it so that we can actively have these conversations? The only reason that people steal and the only reason people do underhanded things is because they feel that they don't have enough. So if people don't have enough, what are we doing to address the models of scarcity that are supporting these types of dynamics? Mining, deforestation, like all of these things come from scarcity. What are we doing to fortify the dynamic within us as individuals? This is the question. If people are going to steal things, why are they stealing it, and where is this rooted? This is the conversation to have first. And if people are not having that conversation and they're skipping steps, don't skip steps. You and I both know, Kole, that when you skip steps, you don't get shit done. We got to stop skipping steps. And the thing is, are we doing this work in our own homes? I know so many people that are activists for psychedelics and not going down and
Child
slavery and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But their home life is an absolute train wreck. They can't get stuff together in their home because they're terrified, and the scarcity in their homes. They feel like they can't do enough in their home with their children, and they can't focus on that stuff. So they go outside and they activate outside. Are you changing the frequency tone in your home? Are you changing that? Do you know how? Then let's have a conversation about how you can interact. That's it. Let's start there. Let's start being human beings to each other. Let's start being in a space where we can actually nurture one another and stop stepping on one another in our own homes. As a nurse, for 25 years in the clinical setting, the most heinous things that I saw were people in their own homes beating on their children, on their spouses, on their cousins, raping their family members, all of this stuff that we're doing in our homes. But we bypass that, skip the step, and we go to activate outside. We blame the government, who's based on keeping the systems this way because the government is built from a bunch of hurt individuals that are in the scarcity model in the first place. Why do you think these people act this way? Because they're scared. They're afraid. Anybody that's a tyrant is terrified. You let a tyrant loose out in the street, they're going to get killed in 5 minutes. They're terrified. You can't do the things that you do to people and not be afraid. This is where we start. What are we going to do in our own homes? This is the conversation I have with people over and over again, and stop skipping steps. And people get bent out of shape about it. And I'm like, you got to stop skipping steps.
I think that so much of that is people want the government to change, someone out there to change, someone out there to do this, do that. When for me, if I want something to change and I take responsibility for making change, then I'm studying the other person that I'm looking to assist in changing their mind or their perspective by opening up. First, I have to know what they value, what's important to them. Why is what they're trying to fight for matter to them? Because until I can meet them in that place and understand what they're fighting for, it's rarely that someone is fighting against something, they're fighting for something. And when I can find out who they're fighting for and why and where that's coming from, then I can find more solutions where they don't feel like they're going to lose the people they love as a cost or as an exchange. And so for me, if anyone is going to step to me and complain about the way that things are, and they're not taking responsibility for the way that they communicate their distaste, distrust, or whatever, I just don't have time for you. I don't have time for just merely complaining. If you want to come have a dialogue, it is your responsibility as the communicator to be understood. That means to be effective, you have to be able to speak to lots of different narratives and lots of different types of people. That's why I'm so grateful you and I have both traveled the world the way that we have, living in New York City, all my time in places like Israel and Kosovo and places that have had war, and people like in Kosovo going after the war and hearing people's stories of hearing their fathers and brothers literally murdered in front of their eyes. And it's not just about gathering information to be informed, because I watch people do that and get into paralysis. They're getting in this consumption or like content constipation. They are so full of shit that they can't take one. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Because
I do.
they're just so full of all this, and they're paralyzed because they don't know what to do next. And there's a difference between gathering information for the purpose of understanding the constructs of the person you're looking to connect with versus just consuming to consume and then wondering why you have a stomach ache.
Nice. That was awesome. Drop it, Mike. Podcast is done, y'all. Thanks a lot. Make sure you make sure you save this. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Instagram. Make sure you share this with somebody you love. Take care, y'all. No, seriously though, this scarcity mindset and this deficit-based mindset provides an environment for us to actually fight. And so it's like, all right, not who are you fighting against? What are you fighting for? The idea that you have to fight is an idea that you're separate from something. And separation is a dynamic that comes from scarcity.
And I think the second we approach it and say, oh, it's happening again. Oh, here they go again. The government, whoever. That is a continue to dehumanize, to maintain the enemy, to ensure that you are nothing like them, to make sure that if you want to take someone down for ethical, physical, like in whatever ways, you have to dehumanize them enough to see them as separate from you. And that's even what I'm watching where, like with the Ibogaine initiative, it's not government ran. Yeah, former Governor Perry is involved. But this is not, the second you lump anything into a they category, you miss the opportunity to change things, to bridge things, to actually be effective. And so it's very important that if you're someone that says you want to be about it and you really want to help change things, to be very mindful of the language you use to they and other in any capacity, because you limit what is possible just by doing that.
Agreed. Great statement. And taking it back to I totally slipped through what I was thinking. Anyway.
We were going to take it back to somewhere, but now we're just going to take it to anywhere.
No, you said something really potent that brought some stuff up for me, and it's phasing out right now. But the scarcity model that's going on in the world, that's providing an environment where people have to fight one another, the dehumanization, that's what it was. So in order for us as human beings to hurt another human being, there has to be a level of dehumanization. Yeah. If you're coming at me and you're pushing me and you're telling me that you're going to hurt me, in order for me to hurt you and stop you, there's a value dynamic that is at play. Do I value myself more than I value you hurting me and doing all of these things? And so there's a level of dehumanization that has to happen for me to harm you. Always. And there's always a value dynamic there. And whenever we bring value into play and I look at you and I say, you're not as valuable as me, I need to have more, there's a level, even if it's subtle, of dehumanization, right? There's of dropping your humanity to a lower level than mine so that I can have what I need. And this is where I'm like, hey, listen, how can we all win? How can we all be human and be in a space where we're all not just sustaining, not just surviving, but we're thriving and we're living together because there's more than enough. when we stop having to hoard things and make sure all these people over here have it and these people over here don't have it, is part of the issue. This is part of why I talked about marginalized people, because marginalized, the idea that we could marginalize another human being is a dehumanization dynamic. Oh, these soldiers and these white folks over here, they get Iboga first. These black folks and these Latinos over here, they'll get it later. Our people over here need to get it first. There has to be a level of dehumanization for this to happen. How do we all win? What are the things that we put in place so that everybody is nurtured, so that everybody is maintained? It has to start at the very beginning with us recognizing that we are all on the same playing field. Because you have more money or because you have a skin tone that's this way, it doesn't mean that you're better than anybody else. And this is part of the challenge. We're still teaching children this shit. It's still baked into our media. It's still baked into our education. We're still hiding books from our kids. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world that's going to fortify this dynamic around the Ibogaine initiative being the way it is. We have to start at home. We have to start having conversations like this. We have to start sharing podcasts like this. We have to start having these conversations that are uncomfortable and maybe unpleasant and may seem a little boring at first. We have to have these conversations.
I'll say, as a white woman in the plant medicine and psychedelic space, at first, because my first approach to it, especially being raised Mormon in Utah, and to Jesus said love everyone, and there is this undertone of not recognizing the systemic racism as a result of where I was raised. And so it took first to understand the otherness, the differentness of different races, places, how that impacts lived experiences, but not by only reading about it or studying history, but getting out into more environments to listen, to observe, to hear, to connect. And it not so much now, but it was at times a very confronting and even scary thing to approach what is often labeled as like white fragility, where I'll see now women in a place that I was once upon a time that care so much, that look like I do, whose nervous systems are so riddled in shame as a part of this systemic programming, so that they don't stand up and make a difference, and they crumble under the pressure of afraid they're going to do it wrong or imperfection or upsetting one of the black folks in their life and other things I had at a period of time. And yet having so much care, that it's this fascinating process too, that when you recognize that that discomfort is part of the control, that dysregulation is part of the programming and control, that even if you're like, no, I want to end systemic racism, but then you can't have an honest conversation or even hold space for someone to get in your face and tell you about how, retribution should be or how things ought to be, and it's the fault of your ancestors. It took time of me being in environments where I was actually exposed to that kind of thing for me to be able to untangle my nervous system from it. And it took finding safe spaces to explore it and people who were really about helping to educate me. And that's something that most people aren't able to sit in.
At the moment.
At the moment. But at the Condor Approach, we do. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, if people have done enough work to approach people not like them. And I'm not just talking about racially. I'm talking about in lots of ways. Reestablish a new way of being in their body.
And that's a huge part of it. This is where it starts, though. The whole fragility thing is a big part of the racism dynamic.
Yeah.
So that people will shut up and people won't activate and all of these things.
The ones that do care do nothing.
Racism isn't really about just the separation of people. It's about the separation of power dynamics.
Yeah.
And you can use all kinds of bodies to fortify the system. And white people are not free from the slavery of or people that we identify as white people, because race in and of itself is made up.
Totally.
It's made up to support the system of racism. And people who identify as white they're not outside of the system as far as slavery goes. They are slaves to the system.
Correct.
And if they're built into the system, they activate on behalf of the system and they don't even realize it. So this is part of the situation, is do you realize the fragility? Do you realize these things? Do you realize what you're doing in your household? Do you realize you're turning a blind eye to the shit that's going on in the corner here? Do you realize what happened in Walmart when this person said this to this person? Did you just turn your head to the side, or did you say something?
Yeah.
This is part, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want. Did somebody get in your face and start screaming and yelling because their system is so dysregulated, and then you start crying and you move away from the situation instead of standing and confronting the situation and being fully involved in it and immersed in it? This is something that's part of the dynamic that I'm talking about. We keep talking stuff about depleting plants. We keep talking stuff about killing the whales. We keep talking all this shit about these things. We're in our own households, and we are in a threat space in our households because of these systemic dynamics.
Yes.
We have to be able to recognize, and it starts off with awareness that you're in the system. Number 2 is honesty with yourself, and then getting away from the system. Aha. Awareness, honesty, away. Like these 3 things, very simple. Aha. Get aware of what's going on, where you are, how you're activating, how you're stuck, whatever it is. Get aware, and then be honest with yourself. Yeah, I'm participating in this shit. Yeah, I'm in it. Okay, cool. I feel shame around it. I feel this. Yeah, I'm feeling all it. Be in it. Be honest with yourself, and then get away from it. How do I get away from this system? How do I get this system away from me? How do I move this away from my family? How do I move my family away from this shit? How do I support other people in these dynamics without rescuing? And so this is where we do it. Aha. This is the thing. We lean into these things primarily, and we get people out of these things, and then we initiate these helpful measures that can help people who are stuck. Not everybody, and we say that, you say this all the time, Kole, not everybody needs psychedelics. Not everybody does. And so there are a lot of times we're sending people to ceremonies and all of these things, and they don't need it. Where they could have a conversation, they could learn the oppression trap triangle, they could learn the confidence continuum, they could learn all these different emotional navigation, 3 points of ease, pause, pull back, physical scan, all these tools that we have. Use those things first. If you can't afford a ceremony, or you don't have access to it, then use these tools first.
Yeah.
Change your relationship in your household. And then maybe you don't need Iboga. Maybe you don't need mushrooms. Maybe you don't need MDMA. Maybe you don't need Wachuma. Maybe you don't need ayahuasca. Maybe you need to sit your ass down and have a conversation.
That's the thing. Going back to the comment of, if we stopped abusing our children, if we didn't abuse our children, would we still have war? If the thing is, every time you scream out your child, every time you cut someone off and yell at them at the grocery store, those are all the acts of violence that are playing out and affect the plants, the animals, and everything else. Because then you have wounded people making decisions and going and cutting down trees because they're angry. When if they understood that connection, first to the self, the environment around them, they would realize that tree is them. But until we get back to that connectedness, that understanding that I am the whale, I am all of those things, then of course we would sit and cut it and slice it, because so many people are walking around hating themselves, consuming things, killing them. So of course they're going to kill things outside of them.
So good. Another mic drop moment. Podcast is now over again for the second time. Wow. That's the thing though, Kole. What you said is extremely powerful in regards to, if people get their stuff together, then we don't need to cut down plants and trees and bushes. We don't need to consume anything, because we're doing the work. And so this is where things like this, being in our school systems, where we teach our kids actually how to navigate their emotions instead of
to confront
conversation. Instead of these addition problems and these multiplication problems, things that were designed around the Industrial Revolution, which is designed around capitalism, which is designed around scarcity models, where we have all this technology now, where we don't need to be doing all the stuff that we were doing before. So can we embed this stuff into our schools to teach our children to actually be able to navigate emotions, so they don't get into these spaces where they're traumatizing and supporting trauma dynamics in other human beings? But we're constantly, this me, I, by myself. That shit is a trauma response that elicits other trauma responses. Yeah. And then we go down the rabbit hole of trauma, and then we have these big things that we need these plants for, that we need all of this stuff for, that we need therapy for. We don't need all this shit if we have a baseline of treating human beings like human fucking beings.
But this is the thing, because people are now going to these master teachers to fix them, and they're going and using them, which, like any relationship, if you get married to use the other person for companionship, for sex, for money, when you use any relationship, how functional and how long lasting is that relationship?
Not very.
So when someone tells me that I use Iboga, I use ayahuasca, I use tobacco, Think about the terminology that you're using just in saying that. When you start to approach things in an integrated fashion and we work together, when I collaborate with ayahuasca, even now I'm collaborating with Iboga. I've never consumed it through my mouth. I have never actually had a ceremony in the traditional sense, but through the documentary, the people I've been through, the plant is very much, I am experiencing the power of it. And if we can actually remove this idea, you must consume everything to learn from it as a master teacher, plant, animal, fungi, or other, but that by holding a certain crystal or stone or food, that many of the messages you can get without consuming or it having to die or to transmute for you. If you take responsibility for your day-to-day life and stop using things, then you will find more things will be there to serve you.
There it is. Ibogaine Initiative. We're back, y'all.
So this was the thing. I told y'all at the beginning, we were talking about phasing psychedelics out of our conversation in 2025 for all the reasons that we talked about, y'all. We don't pretend to know it all, but we are committed to being in the conversations. Nothing backs us down. You can come at me with any question, and if I don't know, I'll tell you, as long as you don't put your hands on me, okay? And I do require a certain tone for me to hear you. But it's you continuing to do the work to be effective in your communication. If you really want things to change and you don't even dare to tell the people in your life you're working with psychedelics, but you're going to suddenly change the initiative or go vote in a ballot box all quietly, that's the problem. Be vocal, be educated, be in dialogue. The true teller will be, if you can't face your own mother with a conversation, start there, and you'll have a much easier time with a legislator or a lawyer.
Amen.
Or anything like that. Because
Amen.
if you can't face the people in your life you love, but you expect to find common ground or education for someone not like you with no compassion or reason to care who you are, you got things a little backwards, fam.
Good luck with that.
You have so much opportunity to practice at home.
Good luck with that,
Go
y'all.
practice.
Go practice. So before you do your Iboga and your mushrooms and your MDMA and your sassafras,
And your kana.
Wachuma and your Aya, all of these things, have some conversations, fam, and see what you can do to release these things from your body, from your psyche, and recognize that there's a possibility for a newness that you never considered before, that you can create outside of psychedelics. And then if you need additional support, then you lean into the psychedelic space, fam. But there's a lot that you can do. And that's why we have the Condor Approach, because we have a lot of really awesome tools. And you don't have to learn all of them. You can learn one tool, use that tool.
One tool will
and
change your
one
life.
tool will change your life.
And I will add that when you learn these tools and then choose to sit and learn from the master teachers, Tah and I don't call it plant medicine, by the way. We call them master teachers, whether in plant, animal, human, or fungi form, in chemical form even. When you have this information, you approach them as teachers and you become a student instead of a patient. As long as you keep showing up sick in your heart, mind, body, or soul, you're going to get doctors and diagnosis. And that can serve certain people at certain times. But if you're done with that phase and you want to really sit and learn from these master teachers, then understanding some of this language will completely set you free. And if you don't come to the Condor Approach or you're looking for more support in your life, Monday, April 1st, ain't no foolin', we are launching the Condor Coach Directory, which means you can find a Condor coach who is trained in all the things that we talk about. We teach you how to find the right coach for you, because every coach is not for every person, just like every substance, and master teacher is not for every person in every process. So if that sounds appealing to you, get the link out of the show notes. We are launched. Go get it in. Thank you for listening. Make sure that you go leave a review, please. That's what helps this podcast be heard. And if there's nothing else, if some of this has impacted you, leave a review. Let people know below what stood out to you and what episode so that they can check it out too.
Much love, y'all. Be easy, be free. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. And don't forget,
Integration is not optional.